Hi, I'm Selah. At 39, I thought I knew betrayal, but nothing prepared me for the day my own parents told me, in front of a crowd, that I wasn't welcome. My sister stood behind them, smug, until my husband walked in, holding the documents that exposed them all, the lies, the stolen business, the legacy they tried to erase. It wasn't just about one party. It was about decades of silence, manipulation, and erasure. Why would a family go so far to pretend you don't exist? The rain was already coming down when I turned onto my parents' street. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than I realized, knuckles pale as lightning lit up the neighborhood. My daughter, Lily, was asleep in the back seat, her small chest rising and falling against the pink blanket she carried everywhere. She had insisted on coming tonight, even though I'd been hesitant from the moment I received the so-called invitation. I slowed in front of the house, the place where I'd grown up, but now it looked more like a stranger's home than my own. Warm yellow light poured through the wide front windows, laughter carried out even over the thunder. Cars lined the curb, fancy ones mostly, and I knew Callista had organized the guest list. Her touch was written all over it. She always liked her friends to see how well she could perform. I parked at the end of the block, stepping out with an umbrella in one hand and Lily bundled against my chest with the other. She stirred, coughed a little, and whispered, "Are we late, Mommy?" I kissed the top of her damp hair. "No, sweetheart, we're right on time." Though in my gut, I knew we weren't welcome. By the time I reached the gate, the rain had turned into sheets of water, soaking the edges of my coat. I rang the bell. For a moment, nothing, just more laughter from inside. I pressed again, a little harder this time. The door cracked open an inch, and Callista's face appeared, perfectly painted, not a hair out of place. "Well, well," she said, lips curling into a half-smile. "Look who decided to show up." Before I could answer, she glanced down at Lily in my arms, rolled her eyes, and muttered, "Figures." Then she pushed the door shut in my face. I stood there frozen, rainwater dripping from my bangs. My first thought was that she was joking, that she'd fling it open again and laugh. But the seconds stretched. The laughter inside grew louder, sharper. I knocked again, my voice firm despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "It's me. I came for the family celebration." This time, it wasn't Callista who came. My mother's face appeared behind the glass pane. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her expression, recognition, maybe even guilt, but it vanished quickly. She shook her head, her voice cutting through the storm. "What are you doing here, Selah? You weren't invited." "You're only going to cause trouble." And then the words that would lodge themselves deep in me. "Let the rain deal with the useless one." The window slammed shut. I couldn't breathe. Lily's cough grew harsher against my chest, pulling me back. I tore my coat off and wrapped it tighter around her small frame, trying to block the cold air from cutting through. I whispered in her ear, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's got you." But inside my chest, panic was clawing at me. She'd had pneumonia once before when she was 2. The sound of her ragged breathing then had haunted me for months. Every time she so much as sneezed, I couldn't let her get sick like that again. I scanned the street, hoping for some kind of shelter, but the hedges surrounding the property made it feel like a fortress. I stepped back onto the sidewalk, the puddles splashing against my shoes, and walked to the nearest street lamp. The dim glow cast long shadows on the wet pavement, and for the first time in years, I let my shoulders drop. I could see everything from where I stood, the silhouettes moving inside, glasses clinking, my father's photo on the mantel surrounded by flowers. They had chosen to celebrate their legacy tonight, and once again, I was written out of it. Tears mixed with the rain on my face. I remembered my graduation, when my name was barely mentioned in my father's speech, while Callista's was sung like a hymn. I remembered giving birth to Lily and lying in the hospital bed alone, no family member in sight, while my mother bragged online about Callista's latest award. And worst of all, I remembered my father's funeral, the day I stood by the casket with no chance to speak, because my sister insisted my grief wasn't photogenic enough. I'd been invisible for years. Tonight was no different. I shifted Lily higher on my hip, rocking her gently as she coughed again. A sharp crack of thunder rolled through, vibrating in my bones. Something inside me hardened with it. Not tonight. I turned away from the house, tightening my grip on my daughter. My jaw ached from clenching, but I refused to let another tear fall. If they wanted to lock me out, fine. I wasn't going to beg. The storm followed us as we stepped off the curb. The rainwater soaked through my shoes, chilling my toes, but I kept moving. Then headlights cut across the darkness, washing over me. A car slowed at the corner, and just as I adjusted Lily on my shoulder, a familiar voice called my name through the downpour, one I hadn't heard in months. I froze in place as the headlights caught me. My breath hitched, heart racing, not because of the light, but because of the voice that followed it. It wasn't Callista. It wasn't Mom. It was Dante. He pulled the car over slowly and rolled the window down. "Get in," he said, voice calm, as if we weren't soaked to the bone, as if my world hadn't just been ripped in half by the people who were supposed to love me most. I didn't speak. I just nodded, climbed into the passenger seat with Lily curled up in my arms. She was half asleep, fevered cheeks against my chest, breath still shallow. Dante didn't ask questions. He just turned up the heat and drove. I looked out the window the whole ride back, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. Not a word passed between us, but it didn't feel silent. It felt understood. By the time we reached our apartment, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. I carried Lily inside, leaving a trail of wet footprints down the narrow hallway. Dante stayed behind to grab her overnight bag from the trunk, which I had packed earlier just in case the celebration ran late. I stepped through the door, the cheap carpet squelching beneath my shoes. Everything smelled faintly of damp fabric and lemon cleaner. I laid Lily gently onto the old sectional sofa, peeled off her soaked socks, then draped a fresh blanket over her. She stirred slightly, murmuring, "Mommy?" And I brushed her hair from her forehead. "I'm here, baby. Go back to sleep." Only when I turned around and saw the puddle at my feet did it hit me. How cold I was. How tired. I tugged off my coat and dropped it by the door. Water pooled from my sleeves and hair, soaking the rug. I didn't even bother to change. I just stood there, staring at the small chaos around me, shoes kicked off at weird angles. Grocery bags half unpacked from 2 nights ago, bills on the counter, unopened. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from the memory. That sentence, that tone. My mother's voice, weaponized again. And then, her. Callista. Behind the window, standing just over our mother's shoulder. The smirk. That smug little curl of her lip that said, "You were never one of us." I slumped into the kitchen chair and covered my face with both hands. My body trembled with quiet sobs, but no sound came out. I didn't want to wake Lily. I didn't want her to see me like this. Not again. The front door clicked. I looked up. Dante stepped in, set down the bag, and walked straight to me. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He'd seen it in my face before I even stepped into the car. He pulled me up and into his arms. I clung to his shirt, shaking silently. He whispered something. I think it was, "You're okay now." But it didn't land. Not really. I knew I wasn't. I wasn't okay, and hadn't been for years. We stood there like that for a while, his hand stroking my back in slow, familiar circles. Then I stepped away, wiped at my eyes, and said, "I need a shower." He nodded, and I slipped into the bathroom. The water was hot and brutal, and I let it scald the back of my neck. I leaned against the tile, eyes closed, and tried to hold it together. But the memories clawed through. The last party. It had been over a year ago, Thanksgiving. I'd baked 2 pies and made cornbread dressing from scratch, bought a burgundy dress with a little shimmer at the waist, spent half my paycheck on shoes that wouldn't kill my feet. I had been so excited, so stupidly hopeful. I waited all afternoon for the address. When I texted Callista, she replied hours later with a dry, "Didn't Mom tell you?" And by then it was already dark. That night I sat on my bed, fully dressed, makeup done, Lily asleep beside me in her pajamas. And I watched Callista live-stream the dinner. My mom at the head of the table, candles, matching napkins, laughter echoing through the phone speakers. Not once did anyone mention me. No one asked where I was. No plate was set for me. I remember turning off the phone and sitting in that silence, the cranberry pie still warm on the kitchen counter. I got out of the shower, wrapped myself in a towel, and walked to the sink. The mirror was fogged, but my reflection stared back. Tired, swollen eyes. Red nose. My face looked older tonight, like I'd aged 10 years in the span of 2 hours. "They've made you feel disposable for years," Dante said from the doorway. "But you're not. You never were." I met his eyes in the mirror. He meant it. He always did. "I'll take you back there right now," he offered. "We don't need to knock. We don't need their permission." I smiled, a small, hollow thing. No, not tonight. I needed to sit with this, to feel it fully. Because if I didn't, I'd start making excuses for them again. Back in the living room, I changed into sweatpants, sat cross-legged on the floor by Lily, and ran my fingers through her hair. She slept so deeply, completely unaware of the cruelty we'd just walked through, and maybe that was a blessing. Then, without thinking, I stood and walked to the mirror in the hallway. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting harsh lines across my face. I looked into my own eyes, not the tiredness, not the pain, deeper. And what I saw was something I hadn't felt in years. Fire. Not again, never again. I turned, grabbed my phone from the coffee table, and scrolled past my usual contacts. Then I hesitated. My thumb hovered over a name I hadn't seen in months. Bryn. We hadn't spoken since last spring. She'd picked my mother's side in a very public, very petty family argument, but she always had a way of sensing when the wind was shifting. I tapped the screen. It rang twice. Then her voice answered, low and cautious. "Selah? I was wondering when you'd call." The line went silent for one breath too long after I said hello. I thought she might hang up, thought maybe the courage to dial had already burned out in her. But then Bryn's voice came again, more certain this time, steadier. "You want to talk?" I did. God, I did. More than I realized until that moment. We met a week later at her office downtown. It wasn't glamorous, just a brick building wedged between an optometrist's shop and a bakery that had been boarded up for years. I drove across town in a fog, my eyes gritty from another night without real sleep. After dropping Lily off at preschool, I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, the damp post-storm air pressing against the windshield as though trying to keep me from moving forward. Bryn opened the office door before I even raised my hand to knock. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her. Not aged, just worn, tired in the way of someone who'd been carrying the same family burdens, the same tangled legacy, longer than any of us had admitted out loud. But when she smiled, there was recognition there. Not pity, not condescension, recognition. "I get it now," her eyes seemed to say. And that was more than anyone else in the family had given me in years. "Come in," she murmured, motioning toward a chair opposite her desk. The office smelled faintly of coffee and paper. File cabinets bulged against the walls. Her law degree hung crooked behind her, the frame tilted as if even it had grown tired of standing straight. A yellow legal pad already sat open on the desk, pen resting across its margin. "I found something," she said without preamble. My stomach dropped. I sat down slowly, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling. From her desk drawer, she pulled a silver flash drive, plugged it into her laptop, and clicked a file labeled Family Tribute, Final Cut, MP4. "This was played at the reunion," she explained, pressing play. "I expected something corny, a slideshow with outdated transitions, sentimental music, a few too many fades to black. I was prepared to roll my eyes, maybe even laugh bitterly at whatever nostalgic nonsense Callista had cobbled together. But I wasn't prepared for what I didn't see. Image after image filled the screen. My father holding Callista as a baby, his face beaming with paternal pride. Bryn's graduation photo, cap tilted just so. My mother's birthday cake glowing with candles, everyone crowding around, shots of the family cabin at Lakeview, summers that were supposed to belong to all of us. But not one single photo of me. I leaned closer, willing my eyes to find myself in the corners, in the background, even blurred in motion. Nothing. A Christmas I remembered vividly. I'd worn a red sweater that year. I remembered the scratchy wool, the way Dad teased me for spilling cocoa down the front. The video showed the same holiday, but cropped tight. Just Callista and our parents. my father's retirement party, where I'd given the toast. The camera zoomed so close I'd been cut from the edge, and then came the voiceover. My mother's voice, warm and confident, narrating over the footage as though telling the story of a perfect family. And Callista has always been the backbone of our legacy, she said. She's the one who stayed, who built something. The words struck like a slap. My chest burned. The video ended. The screen went black. Bryn turned the laptop toward me and studied my face. Her voice was quiet, but certain. It's not just careless, she said. It's intentional. I couldn't respond. A lump pressed hard against my throat, blocking air, blocking sound. My hand gripped the armrest of the chair until my knuckles whitened. Bryn let the silence settle before reaching for another file. This one was thick, stamped with the county seal. She opened it carefully, like she already knew what storm it would unleash. You mentioned the old workshop, she said. Your father left it to the three of you equally, didn't he? Yes, I whispered. That's what he told me. That's what he wanted. She pulled out the original deed. He did, 1/3 to each daughter. Signed and notarized 11 years ago. She paused, then slid a second document across the desk. Then, this. The paper trembled in my hands as I scanned it, dated 6 years ago. A digital signature. My name scrawled at the bottom. The document transferred my third of the property to Callista. The date stopped me cold. August 14th. The day Lily was born. The day I lay in a hospital bed, drugged, bleeding, barely clinging to consciousness. I never signed this, I said, my voice thin. Bryn leaned forward. Do you remember anyone showing you papers around that time? And then memory hit like a blade. Callista standing by my hospital bed, a stack of papers in her hands. Dad just forgot to send these before the baby came, she had said. Just some tax stuff. I'd been groggy, exhausted. She'd marked the spots with yellow sticky notes. I'd signed without reading. My stomach turned. I pushed back from the desk and stood abruptly. I need to see the property, I said. Bryn hesitated. Seela, are you sure? I need to go, I said firmly. Late afternoon light was fading by the time I pulled up outside the old workshop. I hadn't been there in years. My father had practically lived inside those walls, sanding wood, building furniture, repairing broken chairs as though they were treasures worth saving. The place had smelled of cedar, of sawdust, of home. Now, the sign out front read, Callista Grace Studio, Luxury Beauty Lounge. I parked down the block, heart pounding as I walked closer. The storefront was all glass and gold trim, fake plants lining the entrance, but something pulled me toward the side alley. Behind the dumpster, half buried in cobwebs, I found it. The old wooden sign, James' Daughter's Woodcraft. The paint was faded, the wood cracked, but I could still see my father's hand in every carved letter. I knelt beside it, fingertips tracing the grooves. You'll have your name on something that matters one day, Seela, he'd once told me, pride lighting his face. Tears stung my eyes, but I swallowed them back. I wasn't here to cry. I stood and walked back to the front door. Inside, the air was cold, perfumed, sterile. A receptionist with long fake lashes glanced up from her screen. Do you have an appointment? She asked, tone flat. No, I said. I'm here to see the building. Her eyes flicked over me. This is a private facility. Tours aren't open to the public. I met her gaze without flinching. I'm not the public. I'm family. Her brows arched. You don't look familiar. Trust me, I said, voice low and even. I'm more familiar than you think. She blinked, uncertain, but I was already turning. I left before she could call Callista. Back in the car, Dante was waiting, hands loose on the steering wheel. He hadn't asked questions when I'd said I needed to check something. He didn't now. You okay? He asked as I slid into the passenger seat. No, I admitted. He nodded, no judgment in his eyes. Want to talk about it? I handed him the documents Bryn had printed. My throat tightened as I spoke. This used to be mine. He flipped through the papers, his jaw tightening. Then we make copies, we track dates, we build a case. You're not just a memory they can erase. His words sank into me like heat into chilled skin. Not just a memory. The sun was slipping low, shadows stretching long across the sidewalk. I sat with the deed in my lap, my thumb brushing the corner of the page over and over, grounding myself in its reality. They wanted war, I whispered, more to myself than to Dante. My voice hardened as I repeated it, louder this time. They wanted war. Let's give them one. The next morning, I called Bryn again. This time, I didn't whisper. My voice came out firm, almost foreign to my own ears, and I could hear her startled breath on the other end of the line. Seela, she said carefully, are you sure you want to do this? I have to, I answered without hesitation. I can't keep wondering. I can't keep pretending it doesn't matter. Silence stretched for a heartbeat, and then she exhaled. All right, come by. We met at her little home office around noon. Sunlight filtered in through cheap blinds, laying stripes across the beige carpet and the scattered case files on her desk. The air smelled faintly of printer ink and coffee that had gone cold. It wasn't glamorous, just 4 walls, overstuffed filing cabinets, and a desk that sagged under years of legal battles. But it was safe. It was private. Lily was at preschool, her backpack stuffed with crayons and snacks, leaving me a rare few hours to stand in my own skin without interruption. For those hours, I wasn't just mom. I was Seela, the daughter who deserved more than silence. Bryn didn't waste time with pleasantries. She reached into a manila folder and pulled out an old voicemail file saved to a yellowed USB stick. She slid it across the desk toward me. Here, she said. This was on Uncle's old phone, your dad's voice, what he thought of you. My hands shook as I pressed play. The speaker crackled, and then my father's voice, warm, steady, familiar in a way that hit me harder than I'd prepared for, filled the room. Seela understands the heart of what I've built, he said. She's the one I trust with it. The words were simple, soft, even, but they landed like a bell rung in the hollow of my chest. Something long dormant lit inside me. Tears pressed at the corners of my eyes. For years, I had convinced myself that I'd imagined his love, that the warmth I remembered was just me trying to fill an absence. But here was proof, undeniable, preserved in sound, that once I had been seen, that once I had been chosen. I pressed my fingers against my lips, breathing through the ache. It felt like reclaiming air I hadn't realized I was starved for. Bryn waited until the message ended, giving me space. Then she reached for another folder, this one sealed in an envelope that had yellowed with age. My father's handwriting scrawled across the front in uneven ink, in case of conflict. I found this in his things, she said softly, hidden at the back of a drawer. He meant it for you. My breath caught as I slid a finger under the flap. The paper inside was thin, fragile, but the words were strong. It states clearly, Bryn read over my shoulder, that the business is meant to be shared equally among his daughters. That you, Seela, were to inherit, not to be erased, that Callista's ambition should be watched. My throat closed. The words swam before my eyes. He had known. 2 weeks before he died, he had written this, a warning disguised as protection. He had seen what Callista was capable of, and he had tried to leave me armor in the only way he could. I pressed the letter to my chest, my heart pounding against it as if it might fuse into me. For a moment, all I felt was the raw. I remembered that morning light. Soft, golden, filtering through the curtains as if the world itself were offering me one last chance to gather myself before the storm. The quiet of dawn pressed gently against my shoulders, giving me space to breathe. Lily was still asleep in her toddler bed, her tiny body curled under a blanket patterned with faded stars. I sat on the edge of my own bed, phone in hand, heart thudding so loudly I swore it might wake her. On the screen, the calendar glowed with a reminder. Family meeting, Friday. The letters looked ordinary, but I could feel the weight behind them. This wasn't just another gathering, another opportunity for Callista to preen or my mother to rewrite history. This was the moment where silence would end. No more waiting, no more shrinking. I slid out of bed carefully, my bare feet brushing the cool floorboards, careful not to stir Lily. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint rattle of the coffee kettle. Dante must have already left for his morning errands, lawyer consults, printing documents, confirming with the notary. He always left behind the smallest of clues, a folded dish towel on the counter, the coffee grounds already measured. He said small tasks steadied him. For me, they felt like offerings, proof that I wasn't alone in this fight. I boiled the water, poured it over the grounds, and inhaled the bitter steam as it filled the room. I wrapped both hands around the mug and let the heat seep into me. The taste was sharp, grounding, almost metallic. It tasted like resolve. By noon, I was sitting at a corner table in the little cafe by the canal with Bryn and Dante. The windows were streaked from yesterday's drizzle, and the air smelled faintly of toasted bread and soap, like fresh laundry left in the sun. The clouds parted just enough to send scattered beams of light across the floor, as though even the weather couldn't decide what side it was on. I pushed back my chair, folded my hands, and let silence sit for a moment before speaking. For days, I had rehearsed what I might say to them, Callista, Mother, all of them, but the rehearsed lines had always felt too small. Now, with the weight of their eyes steady on me, I simply turned on the voice recorder app on my phone and began. "You may have locked me out in the rain," I said, voice calm, "but you have never silenced me." The words fell quiet, final. My voice didn't waver, though every nerve in me hummed with tremors. When the recording stopped, I held my breath, letting the silence echo. Dante leaned over, slid a letter into an envelope, and pressed it closed with firm hands. "We'll make copies," he said. 100 if we need to, so no one can claim they didn't hear you. Bryn reached into her satchel and laid out another set of papers, her brows drawn. "I confirmed with the county records," she said. "There are gaps in the deed transfers, digital signatures where there should have been physical ones. We can challenge every single one of them." She tapped the page where my name had been erased. "They removed you while you were lying in a hospital bed." I looked out the cafe window, watching people pass, umbrellas tucked under arms, coats flapping in the breeze, conversations carrying just loud enough to remind me that life for others went on untouched. For me, time had narrowed into this single stretch of road leading toward confrontation. And then, unbidden, memory flickered. I was 16 again, standing in the hallway outside our kitchen. Callista's voice had carried sharp and deliberate, pitched loud enough to reach me where I hovered, invisible. "She's just a drain on us all." The words cut clean, leaving no doubt of their intent. No kindness, no sisterly grace, just a verdict. I had curled into myself that night, silent, but I promised then I would never let her define me. Still, I had let her words burrow deeper than I wanted to admit. The waiter set down my iced tea, sweet, too sweet, and I stirred it with the straw just for something to do with my hands. Dante reached across the table and laid his hand over mine. His voice was steady, anchored. "They've made you feel dispensable for years," he said. "You're not." I nodded, letting the words settle into the cracks inside me. For a moment, I believed him. Later, back at my apartment, I spread the documents across the dining table like pieces of a map. Deed transfers, old emails, the letter Dad had hidden, declaring me his legacy, photographs cropped until I disappeared from their frames. Lily's preschool drawing lay among them, a stick-figure family holding hands, 3 daughters, 1 father, 1 mother. Lily had drawn all of us, even though my mother had erased me from so many pictures before. That drawing reminded me what innocence looked like, what I was fighting to reclaim. I began writing, slowly at first, then with more certainty. I wrote each sentence as if weighing it on a scale. "I will no longer bleed quietly for your comfort," I scribbled. I paused, reading it aloud. The words tasted heavy, sharp, true. For years, I had begged for a place at the table. This time, I wasn't begging. Shadows stretched long across the room as evening fell. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes. Lily played in her corner with her doll, humming to herself, while Dante sat on the couch, his gaze following me as I paced the room, speech in hand. "One day," I whispered to Lily as I knelt beside her. You'll see your mother stand tall. She looked up at me with wide eyes, uncomprehending, but trusting. I kissed her forehead, letting the promise root itself in me. When the phone rang, Bryn's voice carried through, sharp and certain. They're going to lose it when they see you walk in, she said. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel dread. I felt something fierce, something bright, pride, sharpened into steel. I promised myself then I would not flinch. The morning of the meeting arrived not gently, but like thunder shattering a cloudless sky. I woke before Lily stirred, before the sun slipped its first light through the curtains. The air in the apartment felt charged, brittle, as though the whole building understood what was waiting for me that day. I sat at the kitchen table in silence, a mug of black coffee cooling between my palms. My speech lay in front of me, creased at the corners from so many nights of rehearsal. I read it one more time, my lips moving soundlessly, each word familiar now, sharp enough to cut. Every sentence had been carved down to its core. No wasted air, no softened truths. My heart pounded, not in panic this time, but in anticipation. Today was not about surviving their version of me. Today, I stood for myself. When I dressed, I chose black. A simple dress, straight lines, no embellishments. I didn't want color to soften me, didn't want jewelry to glitter like distraction. I wanted no one to look at me and think of vanity. I wanted them to see only steel. Lily padded out of her room, still groggy, her doll dragging behind her. She kissed my cheek before the school bus came. Her hands, so small, wrapped around my wrist as if she could hold me steady by sheer will. "Mommy," she whispered, "be brave." I pressed her close to me, inhaling the sweet, sleepy scent of her hair. She didn't know what I was walking into, not fully, but her words gave me what I needed. Purpose. By 8:30, I stood in front of the event hall in downtown Eugene. Its great oak doors loomed tall, brass handles gleaming in the morning light. I swallowed once, straightened my spine, and pushed them open. The smell inside hit me first. Polished wood, fresh upholstery, the faint bite of cleaning products meant to disguise sweat and nerves. The chairs were arranged in a semicircle, the kind of arrangement designed to look inclusive, but in truth, spotlighted whoever stood at the front. Tall windows let in the gray light of a Pacific Northwest morning, filtered and heavy. I was early. Too early. Only a handful of relatives had drifted in, murmuring among themselves. Callista stood at the front, poised on a small raised platform, adjusting slides on the projector like she was preparing for a shareholder meeting. Mother sat in the front row, posture perfect, chin tilted high. She didn't look at me as I entered. She didn't need to. Her silence carried the sting of disapproval loud enough. Dante flanked me, not hovering, but near enough that his presence steadied me. He wasn't there as a bodyguard. He was there as proof I wasn't alone. I walked up the aisle. The air shifted as I passed. Conversations stuttered. Chairs creaked. Aunts leaned toward each other, murmuring behind hands. I took a seat near the back, folding my arms across my chest. My face remained still. I didn't try to smile. I didn't need to. Callista cleared her throat at the podium. Her voice rang too brightly, too rehearsed. "Thank you to everyone for coming," she began. "This gathering is to restructure the business and ensure growth." Her eyes swept the room, grazing past me without landing. But I caught it. The flicker. Fear. Just for a second. The first crack in her glass mask. She didn't say my name. And then, mid-sentence, every phone in the room buzzed at once. A group text. The sound was a jarring chorus of vibrations and pings. People glanced down at screens. Murmurs rippled. The message was from Mother. "Why is she here? She looks pathetic." The words blazed across my phone screen, black letters on white, as clean and cutting as if she'd spoken them into a microphone. Gasps, whispered reactions. A few people looked at me, then quickly away. I stayed seated, calm. I raised my phone, screen lit, and my voice carried steady across the room. "I believe you meant to exclude me from that thread," I said. Chairs scraped against the floor. Someone dropped a pen. The room contracted. tension pulling every breath taut. Mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Callista's face drained of color, and for the first time, I saw doubt flicker openly in her eyes. Not in the corners, not behind closed doors, but here, in front of everyone. Uncle Ray rose awkwardly to his feet, his hand trembling against the back of his chair. "Sela," he stammered, "maybe we should calm down." His words trailed off when no one moved to support him. Some nodded faintly, unsure, while others stared fixedly at their laps, refusing to choose sides. Dante stepped forward, unassuming but certain. He held a folder in his hands, documents heavy with history. The original deed, the forged transfers, the timelines, the paper proof of betrayal. He cleared his throat, and his voice was low but unmistakable. "For clarity," he said, "we'd like the minutes to reflect that the documentation under discussion today may be legally challenged." The room shifted. Whispers rushed like a tide. Mother's lips parted, ready to protest, but no sound came. Callista's jaw clenched so tight the muscles in her neck stood out. The air vibrated with tension, an invisible cord drawn to its breaking point. And then I stood. My heels clicked against the wood floor as I walked up the aisle. Each step belonged to me. I mounted the small platform where Callista had been arranging her slides. The projector light flickered behind her, casting her in silhouette, but I carried something brighter. I lifted a single sheet of paper, aged, yellowed slightly, but still strong. My father's handwriting sprawled across it, his voice preserved in ink. "I built this for all my daughters," I read aloud, my voice carrying across the hall. "Sela most of all." Gasps rippled through the room. A cousin pressed a hand to her chest. Someone shifted uncomfortably in their seat. Callista's cheeks flamed red, her composure crumbling in real time. I looked up from the page. "I will not let shadows erase me," I said. My words didn't tremble. They rang clear. I deserve to be seen, as equal, as legacy, not as an afterthought. Mother's hand clenched white in her lap. Callista's eyes darted to the floor, avoiding mine. A cousin near the front sat forward, his face flushed, unable to meet my gaze. Behind Callista, the projector flickered, throwing Dante's documents into shadowed silhouette, proof looming larger than her slides could ever manage. "Please," I said, sweeping my gaze across them all. "Listen to what has been hidden, the deeds, my father's words, the evidence I've carried. I will not be erased as if I never existed." Silence followed, not a passive quiet, but a roaring, suffocating silence that pressed into every corner of the hall. And then, in the stillness, I caught it. Callista leaned toward Mother, her voice low, but not low enough. "We need to bury this, now." Their eyes met. Fear, panic, regret. The look between them told me everything. For the first time, they were not the ones in control. They didn't know I was recording everything. When the meeting ended, when the last whispers of panic trailed behind Callista and Mother as they slipped out of the hall, I returned home with my folder pressed tight against my chest. By the time Lily was asleep upstairs and the apartment settled into silence, the adrenaline had worn thin, leaving only exhaustion and clarity. I sat at the kitchen table in my bathrobe, the stairwell lamp casting a weak circle of light over the wood. My laptop glowed, cursor blinking in the corner of the screen like it was daring me to decide. My hands trembled as I selected the file, the recording of the meeting, unedited, unvarnished. It showed everything: Mother's cruel group text, Callista's silence when my name came up, Dante's steady declaration, and most importantly, my father's letter in my own voice. I hovered over the upload button for a long moment, my breath catching. Then I pressed it. The file went live on a barely public YouTube link, hidden behind an unlisted setting. I shared it only with a small circle: Bryn, one cousin who had quietly sent me support for years, and 2 neighbors who had known me since childhood, who had watched me run in and out of the old workshop before it became Callista's empire. Because even if the whole world wanted to forget me, my blood still remembered. My skin still remembered what it felt like to be erased, cropped out, hidden. It took minutes, not hours, before the responses started. First came Bryn's message. I saw it. They won't be able to deny this. Then came one from my father's old woodworking friend. He wrote, I always thought you were the one holding that place together. James used to brag about you all the time. Proud of you." The words landed like a balm, like proof that the years hadn't been completely rewritten. More messages followed. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in months reached out, some with shock, others with outrage. Strangers, people who must have found the link through someone else, sent kind words. "You're brave. Keep fighting." But the shift came just as quickly. Dark currents surfaced in the form of screenshots stripped of context, whispers that traveled faster than any truth. Someone posted on an obscure local forum, "She's always been unstable." Another thread popped up within hours, claiming I'd had a full breakdown after Lily was born. My hospital stay, my bleeding and recovery, was turned into a weapon, my vulnerability twisted into a smear. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, my stomach hollowing. It felt like being stripped bare in front of a jeering crowd, a crowd that didn't want to understand, that preferred the caricature they'd been fed. Tears came slow, bitter, stinging. Dante walked in quietly, closing the door behind him. He didn't flinch when he saw the tears on my face. "I saw the posts," he said softly. "I'm sorry you're going through this." I shook my head. "Don't be sorry. I don't need pity. What I needed was truth." He sat beside me, his hand brushing the edge of the laptop. Together we pulled up the files, emails, deed transfers, my father's letter. We watched how people online cherry-picked pieces of reality and twisted them with malice, how they ignored the totality of what we had. I felt small, yes, exposed, but also something else, alive with a strange purpose. Upstairs, Lily slept soundly, oblivious to the chaos unfolding below. She didn't know her mother's childhood, her legacy, was being dragged into the public square and dissected. She didn't know that her family name was being tested in fire. All she knew was safety, warmth, bedtime stories. She deserved to keep that innocence. I pulled out an old journal, its pages worn and smudged. On one of the first pages, I had scrawled in angry, uneven handwriting years ago. "I let them believe I understand silence. Someday they'll hear my real voice." I read passages aloud to Dante, my voice cracking in places. The words were raw, painful, but in their rawness they felt like healing. Dante listened quietly. Then he stood, walked to his desk, and opened his own laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard. I watched him type, line by line, a statement of solidarity. "I support Sela's truth," he wrote. "The documents, the records, the evidence. These matter. She has been erased for too long. I stand with her." He posted it on his local history blog, the one dedicated to preserving voices that the town had forgotten. Within hours, comments appeared, neighbors who remembered my father's shop, locals who recalled me helping sand furniture or sweeping sawdust. Their words steadied me. Still, the storm swirled. That night, I lay awake with Lily curled next to me, her small breaths brushing against my arm. In the dark, questions pressed hard. Is this going to make things worse? Am I putting a target on my back? On hers? The posts spread. Neighbors I once waved to began averting their eyes, offering awkward smiles before ducking into their cars. Old friends sent private messages praising me, though few would risk saying so publicly. And then came the warnings. Be careful. They don't like being exposed. Daylight bled through the curtains. I rose, my body tired, but when I looked in the mirror, I saw something new etched into my reflection. Lines under my eyes, yes, but also fire. Lily handed me a drawing she'd made before breakfast. 3 girls smiling in front of a workshop. Her version of our family, one where no daughter was erased. I pressed the paper to my heart, swallowing back the ache. I opened my phone and typed a message to Callista. You tried to erase me, misrepresent me. That ends now. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I gathered the documents again. I prepared for what came next. Because the posts, the whispers, the lies, they could circle endlessly, but they could not bury the truth. And when I spoke publicly, it wouldn't be half a story, half a rumor. It would be everything. The moment I saw the invitation pop into my inbox, something inside me shifted. It was from Callista's PR team. An elegant font, rebranding event at the community center downtown. I held it between trembling fingers in the living room, the light from outside painting stripes across the carpet. Dante watched me, brows furrowed. "This is it," he said quietly, as if he already knew I needed no encouragement. "The stage is already set." I nodded. Later that day, I pulled on a simple yet sharp black dress. Nothing flashy, just strong. I tucked my father's letter into my purse, along with my speech notes and the notarized deed that Bryn confirmed beyond doubt. When Lily asked what I was doing, I told her, "I'm going to tell the truth." She smiled, innocent and unsullied. That smile reminded me why I couldn't back down now. A week passed. I looked at myself in the mirror that evening, midweek, streetlights glowing in the bathroom window, and wondered, could I stand this? Could I face them in public? I saw the tiredness under my eyes, but also a fierce clarity I haven't felt in years. I turned away, practiced my greeting, practiced standing firm. Saturday morning, I arrived early at the center. The sun was mild, sky slightly overcast, like the air was waiting too. The entrance had banners reading, "Callista Grace Rebrand Launch." Flowers. A red ribbon that might have looked celebratory if the truth weren't buried under so much betrayal. A crowd of community leaders, local press, strangers curious about what this new brand meant. Family scattered among them, dressed nicely for the show. I walked in, Dante beside me. My heart pounded, each step deliberate. Callista stood on stage, smiling at the crowd, thanking everyone who believed in her vision. Her face was radiant, polished, untouched by the storm she'd helped create behind closed doors. I waited until the applause settled. Then I walked toward the stage. Light caught the gold trim of the banner, caught the eyes of journalists with cameras. I paused at the front, drew a slow breath. "Before you invest in this new legacy," I said, voice clear, "you should hear the truth about its foundation." Some heads turned, faces curious. Callista froze mid-smile. I pressed play on my phone. Dad's voice filled the hall. "Sela understands the heart of what I've built. She's the one I trust with it." The recorded room was quiet, echoes from the past bouncing around present walls. Then I held up the deed, notarized years ago, proof that my name was removed under false pretenses. First, the murmurs. Then the faces. Shock. Disbelief. Some gasped. Callista opened her mouth, then shut it. The press cameras flashed. The audience shifted, whispered among themselves. I saw my mother's lips tremble. Anger or shame, I couldn't tell. Bryn stood at my side, handing out packets. The deed, timelines of manipulation, email exchanges. Each document a cut, exposing how deeply betrayal had been woven into their carefully polished image. I raised my voice. "You tried to erase me. You twisted facts. But I am not what you say I am. I am my father's legacy, equal, rightful, present." A cousin collapsed onto a seat, head in hands. A woman behind me wiped her tears. Someone in the press asked for comment. Callista stared. She stuttered apology mixtures that rang hollow. I collected Lily's hand. It trembled slightly. I swallowed. "It's time for accountability," I said, walking off the stage. My heels echoed on the wooden floor. Breath shallow, powerful. A reporter caught up to me outside. "Sela, what do you want now?" she asked. I paused. For a moment, I looked at the press kits in my hands, at Lily's pointed gaze, at Dante's steady presence. I said, "Peace." And accountability. I woke to the squawk of the alarm, and sunlight slanted through the curtains in soft gold waves. Lily was already awake, her small body curled next to mine, clutching her stuffed owl. I sat on the edge of the bed, fingers brushing her hair back gently. The quiet in the house felt unfamiliar, as if peace was trying to settle in but hadn't quite arrived. At the courthouse, I held Dante's hand in the passenger's seat. We drove past the old neighborhood, the workshop I once called home, now rebranded. I felt every mile under the tires, every memory stirring, cuts and kindness intertwined. Rally flags of Grace Studio still flew near Callista's location. But today, I was not a visitor in shadows. Inside the courthouse, I was led through hallway doors that carried echoes, footsteps, hollow voices, whispers. The clerk greeted me, not with surprise, but with the professional calm one has in these places. My name was on their lips, restored in the official records. I signed papers with careful strokes. The deed that had been changed under dubious circumstances was recorrected. The ink settled, the name Sela returned, equal rights recognized. Callista was absent. Her lawyer signed in her place. Some looked away, others sneered. My mother's eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, but her mouth was rigid. Dante squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. I didn't need her apology. Not now. The weight had shifted. Outside, media vans were parked. Cameras rolled. People asked questions. I declined. I'm not a scandal, I said into one lens. I'm a story of survival. I walked past flashing bulbs and kept going, Lily tugging me along. That evening, we climbed the stairs home, knee-deep in empty boxes, the apartment echoing with our decision. We're moving, I told Lily, and she smiled without hesitation. She understood in ways I thought only I could. We packed old photos, snapshots of Grandpa's workshop, birthday cakes, little Sela playing in dusty sawdust. She fingered a photo of Grandpa laughing, said, "Keep the ones with Grandpa smiling." I gathered them carefully. A few days later, we drove over winding coastal two-lanes. Ocean breeze, tangy with salt. Seagulls crying overhead. We settled into a small house by the water, paint peeling, windows wide. I painted the walls pale blue. Lily laughed in sand. The world felt large and open in ways I never allowed before. I taught a community art class, colored pencils, paint on canvas. People older than me, young ones, laughter and mistakes. I watched them. I saw honest pride in their faces. Dante's consulting firm opened quietly in town. Nothing huge, but ours. Late that night, I sat at the kitchen table in our new home, pressed Dad's letter into a frame. Above it, I wrote, in my handwriting, "Your legacy lives in me, Dad." And now the world knows it too. Lily was asleep in her room. Dante was asleep in his chair, exhausted but present. In that quiet, I spoke aloud. I didn't win everything. My voice trembled. But I reclaimed myself. I stood, walking over to Lily's open bedroom door. She stirred, then settled. I whispered, "Mommy's not apologizing for existing anymore." Morning light spilled in. My phone buzzed. Old messages, new ones, some still hurtful, but the burn of them was softer now. I thought of Mom, of Callista. Whether we'd see them again didn't feel urgent anymore. Lily climbed into my lap. She looked up and asked, "Mom, will we ever see them again?" I held her close. The ocean breeze outside rustled the curtains. I shaded my eyes and said, "Maybe, but next time, it'll be on my terms." She was told she wasn't welcome, cast aside like she never mattered. At a family party meant to celebrate, they tried to humiliate her. But when her husband arrived, everything changed, and the lies her family built began to crumble. This emotional revenge story will leave you questioning how far someone should go to reclaim their truth.